Ida for refusing to bail out my golden brother after he drove our mom into debt? I swear, if I hear one more person say, "Oh, but he's been through so much," I'm going to lose it. My stepbrother, Jake, is 25, and somehow, despite both of us being adults, he still manages to act like the misunderstood teenage heartthrob in some cheesy CW drama. Except there's no charm, no plot twist, and definitely no redemption arc. Jake and I have been step-siblings for about 7 years now. My mom married his dad when I was 16 and he was 18. From the beginning, it was clear that Jake was the golden boy. He could do no wrong. If he missed school? Oh, poor Jake was stressed. If I missed school? I was lazy and unfocused. He failed his freshman year of college because he was finding himself. I was expected to be a straight-A student because you're so responsible, honey. Now that we're both adults, you'd think things would even out, right? Nope. Not even close. Jake still lives at home, unemployed, spending his days gaming and occasionally helping his dad with minor house repairs when he feels like it. Meanwhile, I've been working full-time and saving for my own place while contributing to groceries and bills. Despite this, somehow, Jake gets the bigger portions at dinner, more attention during family gatherings, and endless sympathy whenever something mildly inconvenient happens in his life. The worst part? My mom has started defending him. She says stuff like, "Jake has had a hard time adjusting to adulthood, sweetheart," or, "You know Jake isn't as driven as you are." Like, what does that even mean? At what point do you stop babying someone and let them grow up? But the tipping point came last week. My car broke down on my way to work. It was bad, smoke coming out from under the hood, stranded on the side of the road, kind of bad. I called my mom, hoping for some help or advice. Instead, she said they couldn't help me right now because Jake needed some money for emergency expenses. The emergency? He bought a new gaming console. With my mom's money at this point, I'm not just annoyed, I'm furious. And I have this creeping feeling that things are only going to get worse. The gaming console debacle kept gnawing at me for days. Every time I thought about it, I could feel my blood pressure spike. I wasn't asking for much, just a little help when I really needed it. But apparently, Jake's gaming marathons took precedence over me being able to get to work. After shelling out $800 for repairs from my savings, I decided I needed some distance. See, I don't live with Jake and my mom. I moved out a year ago into my own small but cozy apartment. It's not much, but it's mine, and I don't have to deal with Jake leaving dirty dishes on the counter or my mom giving me, he's struggling, speeches every other day. But the thing is, I still visit. Family dinners, holidays, birthdays, I try to stay involved because, despite everything, I love my mom. And honestly, there's always been this little part of me hoping things would change. Last weekend, I stopped by for Sunday dinner. My mom loves hosting these little family gatherings, and I usually bring dessert. When I walked in, Jake was sprawled on the couch, controller in hand, wearing the same wrinkled hoodie he'd probably been in all week. His brand new console was glowing proudly on the TV stand. "Oh hey," he said without looking up. "Mom said your car's all fixed now." Cool. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of how his emergency had left me stranded. Just cooled. I clenched my teeth and walked into the kitchen, where my mom was chopping vegetables. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Can we talk for a second?" She gave me a distracted nod. "Sure, hon, what's up?" I'm not going to keep showing up here if every single crisis revolves around Jake. I've got my own life, my own bills, and I'm tired of feeling like I'm only part of this family when it's convenient. Her face dropped, and she put down the knife. "Oh, sweetheart, it's not like that. Jake he's struggling, okay? He's had a hard time finding his path." Struggling with what? The third boss level in Elden Ring. That made her frown, but I didn't care. I was done. Done with the excuses, done with the coddling. I stayed for dinner, but it felt hollow. Jake dominated the conversation, talking about his hard week, which, shocker, included absolutely zero job applications or meaningful activity. My mom chimed in with gentle affirmations while I silently chewed my food. When I left that night, I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. It hit me then. Jake wasn't really the problem. My mom, with her endless enabling and excuses, was the root of it all, and I had a sinking feeling that things were about to get even worse. It started with a text, "Hey, can you come by Mom's place this weekend? It's important." It was from Jake. And considering he usually avoids direct communication with me unless he needs something, I already had a bad feeling about it. I debated not going. But curiosity, and maybe a little guilt, got the better of me. So, Saturday afternoon, I pulled into my mom's driveway, bracing myself for whatever important thing Jake had cooked up this time. When I walked into the living room, Jake was sitting on the couch, his usual spot, knees bouncing with nervous energy. My mom was perched on the armrest, her expression tight. I barely had time to sit down before Jake blurted it out, "I need a loan." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. "For what, Jake?" He looked at our mom, who nodded at him encouragingly. "I'm in some trouble with my credit card. Just overspent a little. And now they're threatening to shut it down and send it to collections." "How much?" "About $4,000. I stared at him. $4,000. This wasn't just a little overspending. This was months, maybe even years, of reckless spending. And why exactly would I give you $4,000, Jake? My mom spoke up. "Sweetheart, he's trying to fix his mistakes. He's been really stressed about this, and you know how hard it's been for him." I almost laughed. "Hard? He sits on the couch all day, Mom. He doesn't work. He doesn't even try to work." Jake's face flushed, and he muttered something under his breath. My mom gave him a look and turned back to me. "It's not that simple. He's been looking." "Looking where, Mom?" "In Narnia." "Okay, maybe that was a low blow, but I was past caring," she sighed. "I was hoping you could help him. Just this once." "He's your brother, stepbrother," I corrected. "And no, I'm not giving him a dime. I worked for every dollar in my savings account, and I'm not bailing Jake out so he can rack up another $4,000 in debt 6 months from now." Jake's head snapped up. "I said I'd pay you back." "With what, Jake? Monopoly money?" "Your allowance from Mom." My mom gasped. "That's enough." But it wasn't enough. Not for me. I'm done being the responsible one who has to clean up everyone else's mess. If Jake wants money, he can earn it like the rest of us do. I stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked out the door. The guilt didn't hit me until I was back in my car, staring at the dashboard. It wasn't guilt for Jake. I felt nothing but frustration toward him. It was guilt for my mom. I knew she was stuck in this endless cycle of enabling him, and I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere deep down, she knew it too, but enabling Jake was her choice. And I couldn't keep being part of it. Still, I had a nagging suspicion this wasn't the last I'd hear about the loan. And I was right. A week passed after the loan incident, and things were quiet. Too quiet. My mom hadn't called, texted, or even sent one of her classic guilt trip messages about family sticking together. I should have felt relief, but instead, there was this gnawing unease in the back of my mind. Then, on Thursday night, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my aunt, my mom's sister. "Hey, just checking in. Your mom's been really upset lately. She mentioned you had an argument with Jake." There it was. The guilt grenade, lobbed expertly from a third party. I sighed and called her. My aunt is one of the few people in my family who's ever been neutral about the Jake situation. She listens, doesn't take sides, and has always been someone I could vent to. She asked me for $4,000 to bail Jake out of credit card debt. I explained. I said no. My aunt sighed on the other end of the line. "Yeah," she told me. And, well, she didn't exactly ask me, but she sort of hinted around the idea of borrowing money herself. My stomach dropped. "You're kidding." "Nope." And honestly, I said no too. Your mom means well, but she's got blinders on when it comes to Jake. I don't know what it'll take for her to see it. Neither did I. The next day, I decided to call my mom. I didn't want things to fester. When she picked up, her voice was tight, like she'd been crying. "I don't want to fight, Mom," I said softly. "Neither do I," she replied. "But you don't understand how hard it is for him. You've always been so strong, so independent. Jake isn't like that." There it was again. The excuse, the pass, the never-ending safety net. "Mom, he's never going to grow up if you keep rescuing him. And it's not fair for you to go into debt or drain your savings just because he can't control himself." She was silent for a moment. I can't watch him fail, sweetheart." That was the crux of it. My mom wasn't enabling Jake out of malice or ignorance. She was doing it out of fear of what would happen if he had to face real consequences, but her fear wasn't fixing anything. It was just making the problem worse. I love you, Mom. But I'm not going to be part of the cycle. You shouldn't have to keep fixing his mistakes either. He's not a kid anymore. She didn't respond. After a few more seconds of silence, she said, I need to go, okay? I'll talk to you later. The call ended, and I felt like someone had sucked the air out of my lungs. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Jake, about my mom, about this tangled web of dysfunction we were all caught in. I wanted to believe that my mom would have some kind of breakthrough, that she'd realize enabling Jake wasn't helping him, but deep down, I knew better. I just didn't know how bad it was going to get. It was 2 weeks later when I got the call. Not from my mom, not from Jake, but from my aunt again. You need to come over. Now. The urgency in her voice made my stomach flip. I didn't ask questions. I just grabbed my keys and drove straight to my mom's house. When I pulled into the driveway, Jake's car was parked at an odd angle, halfway on the lawn. My mom's curtains were drawn, and something felt off. Inside, the living room was a mess. Papers, empty soda cans, and unopened bills were scattered across the coffee table. Jake was slouched on the couch, arms crossed, glaring at the floor. My mom was sitting across from him, teary-eyed, holding an envelope in her trembling hands. What's going on? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. My mom looked up, and I could see how tired she was. Her makeup was smudged, and her eyes were puffy. It's the house, she whispered. We're behind on the mortgage. I froze. Wait. What? How far behind? Jake groaned and threw his head back dramatically. It's not that bad. Mom's just overreacting. But my mom shook her head. 3 months. They sent a final notice. If we don't catch up soon, we could lose the house. My head was spinning. How did it get this bad? You've always been so careful with money. She wouldn't look at me. But Jake did. And then it clicked. Oh my God, I said slowly, realization dawning on me. You gave him money, didn't you? For his credit cards. My mom didn't answer, but the guilt on her face said everything. Jake scoffed. Why does it even matter? It's not like it's your house. Are you serious right now? I snapped. You spent her mortgage money on, what, video games? Takeout? New sneakers? And now you're sitting here acting like it's no big deal? Don't talk to me like that. Jake barked back, jumping to his feet. You're not better than me just because you have some stupid office job. Jake, my mom cried, but I wasn't backing down. No, Mom. This needs to be said. You bailed him out and now you're paying for it. Literally. He's an adult, but he acts like a child because you let him. And now you might lose your house because of it. Jake stormed out of the room, muttering something under his breath. The front door slammed behind him, leaving me and my mom in silence. She sank into the armchair, shoulders shaking as she started to cry. I knelt beside her, taking the envelope from her trembling hands. Mom, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep saving him at your own expense. I just wanted to help him, she whispered, her voice cracking. I know, I said softly. But he's not helping himself. And he's dragging you down with him. We sat there for a long time. My mom, lost in her guilt and grief, and me, trying to figure out how to stop the cycle from swallowing us whole. Eventually, I said, we're going to figure this out. But Jake can't live here anymore. Not if he's going to keep doing this. She didn't say anything, but she nodded faintly. I had no idea how we were going to untangle this mess, but one thing was clear. Jake's free ride was about to end. Whether he liked it or not. Over the next few days, I worked with my mom to piece together her finances. It was worse than I thought. Not only was she 3 months behind on the mortgage, but her savings account was nearly drained. Credit card statements piled up in a drawer she'd been avoiding, each one showing charges Jake had racked up over the past year. Restaurants, online purchases, gaming subscriptions, it was all there, in glaring black and white. The thing that hurt the most was realizing just how long this had been going on. My mom had been keeping this from me, probably out of embarrassment or denial. Jake had barely been home since our confrontation. When he did come back, he sulked in his room, emerging only to grab food or argue with my mom about invading his privacy. But enough was enough. That Friday evening, I sat across from my mom at the kitchen table. Mom, this can't keep happening. You're on the edge of losing everything because Jake refuses to grow up. He doesn't need another chance. He needs a wake-up call. She didn't argue this time. Instead, she sighed, her shoulders sagging. What do you think we should do? It felt heavy to say it out loud, but I had to. He has to move out. He needs to fend for himself. Tears welled up in her eyes immediately. But where will he go? What if he ends up on the street? He won't, I said firmly. Jake always lands on his feet because someone always catches him. He's not incapable, Mom. He's unwilling. She nodded slowly, wiping at her eyes. That night, we drafted an ultimatum. Jake had 1 month to find a job and start contributing to household expenses, or he'd have to leave. There would be no more handouts, no more excuses. The next day, we sat him down together. Jake sauntered into the living room, arms crossed and face already set in that "I'm the victim here" expression he'd perfected over the years. Jake, my mom started, her voice trembling slightly, "We need to talk." He rolled his eyes. Oh God, what now? I jumped in before he could derail things. You've got 1 month, Jake. 1 month to get a job and start paying your share of the bills. If you don't, you're out. End of discussion. He stared at us, dumbfounded. You're kicking me out? No one's kicking you out, my mom said softly. We're giving you a chance to step up. But if you don't take it, yes, you'll have to leave. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Then Jake laughed bitterly. Wow. So this is it, huh? You're both turning on me. No one's turning on you, I said through clenched teeth. We're asking you to take responsibility for your own life. But he wasn't listening anymore. He stormed upstairs, slamming his door so hard the windows rattled. Later that night, I heard him arguing with my mom through the thin walls. He was angry, indignant, saying things like, "You love her more than me, and you'll regret this when I'm gone." But my mom didn't back down. For the first time in years, she stood firm. When I left that night, I hugged her tight. You did the right thing, Mom. No matter how hard it feels, this is what he needs. She nodded into my shoulder, her voice small. I hope you're right. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling that Jake wasn't going to take this ultimatum well. And I was right. It didn't take a month. It barely took a week. On Wednesday evening, my mom called me, her voice trembling. Jake's gone. I froze. Gone where? He just packed a bag and left. No job, no plan. He said he'd rather sleep in his car than live in a house where no one supports him. There it was, the final act in Jake's perpetual drama, the grand exit he always knew how to deliver. I should have felt relief, maybe even satisfaction, but instead, there was just sadness. I drove over to my mom's house that night. When I walked in, the place felt hollow. His gaming console was still set up in the living room, as if he'd be back any second to pick up where he left off. But the silence said otherwise. He left this on the table, my mom said, handing me a handwritten note. It was short, almost childish. I hope you're happy. You chose her over me. Don't bother looking for me. I'm done with this family. I sighed and set the paper down. Mom, you can't blame yourself for this. But she already was. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she sat hunched over on the couch like she'd been carrying the weight of this for years. I kept thinking, if I just helped him one more time, maybe he'd finally get it together, she said. Voice cracking, I sat next to her and took her hand. He made his choice, Mom. You gave him every opportunity. This isn't on you. We sat in silence for a long time. And the following weeks, things started to shift. My mom began to sort through the financial mess Jake had left behind. I helped her call the bank, set up a repayment plan, and figure out a budget. She sold Jake's gaming console and some other electronics he'd left behind, not for revenge, but because she needed the money to AS for Jake. He popped up occasionally on social media. Posts about cutting toxic people out of your life and selfies in parking lots with vague captions like, starting over, one day at a time. He never reached out. And honestly, neither did we. I'd love to say there was some big, dramatic reunion where Jake apologized, took responsibility, and turned his life around. But life isn't a TV show, and real people rarely get clean redemption arcs. What I do know is that my mom is better now. She's lighter somehow, like she isn't carrying this enormous, invisible weight on her shoulders anymore. She's rebuilding her life, one step at a time. And me? I still visit for Sunday dinners. The house feels different, quieter, calmer. Sometimes I catch my mom staring at Jake's old room, and I know she misses him in her own way. But she also knows she did what needed to be done. Jake's story isn't finished. But it's not my story to tell anymore, and for now, that's enough.